Time now for the Historic Racing News Podcast. Here is your host, Paul Tarsey.
Greetings, and welcome to the first Historic News Chat Show for 2026, powered by Race Retro. The HRN team is back together, and I'm joined, as usual, by the gruesome twosome of Paul Jurd and Jim Roller. And gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for making the time to come on board.
When you say chat show, I think, am I Graham Norton?
Which one of us is?
Yeah, well,
yeah.
There's a whole pod there, isn't there?
There's only one of us here with a beard.
Oh.
Okay. Well, on that note, Paul, you were saying to me just before we sat down that your diary for 2026 is pretty full already.
Yeah, very much so. This is the time of year, actually, when you're sort of busy trying to put together what you're going to do next year. But it's looking pretty much as last year and then the same. I'm now going to do that thing that was not going to work on the post by showing you a list of A4, which is an A4 page, so currently full of race dates so far. But yeah, looking good. Yeah, I know. A couple of new things, doing a couple of meetings for the CSCC, and currently scheduled to be commentating at Castle Combe for the first time ever. So very much looking forward to that for the end of the year. But certainly lots of highlights down there. Hopefully all the same at Goodwood once more, and in particular one I've done for a few years now and always thoroughly enjoy, which is the Brands Hatch Masters meeting, where we have those wonderful Formula One cars going around the Brands Hatch Grand Prix circuit, and that's going to be right at the end of May.
Yummy.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right there, Jim. And Jim, you've got a couple of trips on your agenda for 2026, which I know you're looking forward to.
Oh, very much so. We're going to be coming over for, the mouse in my pocket and myself will be getting on the airplane in February to come over for the Great Race Retro, where we'll be on the stage for 3 days, and you can see just how fat the American really is. And I'm very much looking forward to that. But the big trip for Betty and I this year is we're going to go to France for a couple weeks right before Monaco Historic, and we're hoping that third time is the charm, because this will be our third effort to try to make it to the Monaco Historics. The first, of course, was canceled because of COVID. The second was canceled because of some health issues, and the Baron and the Baroness to join us, Mr. Tarsey, you and your lovely Lisa, to join us down there for a couple days and then head off to Monaco for our first trip to the Historics, which I'm very much looking forward to. And of course, I'll have all my video kit with me, so both at Race Retro and at Monte Carlo, we'll then be posting some stuff on HRN Chronicles on our YouTube channel. So going to be fun, and very much looking forward to it.
Yeah, I think the Historics trip will be, or historique as we should say, is going to be fun.
Of course, Mr. Jurd, if you and lovely Emily can find it in your crammed schedule, you're welcome to join us as well.
As you were speaking, I looked up the dates of the 15th Grand Prix de Monaco Historique, which is on our webpage. If you go and look at the calendar on historicracingnews.com, and it's the 24th to 26th of February, where I am at Brands Hatch commentating.
Actually, April, sorry, yes. Yeah, I hope it's not February, because I really screwed up my VRBO.
Yeah, that would be a bit awkward, wouldn't it?
So, are you available then, Paul?
So, no, I'm at Brands Hatch, unfortunately.
Oh, right, okay.
Although, hold on, I'm not going to say unfortunately, because any trip to Brands Hatch is always good fun.
That'll just teach you to wave lists on A4 of how busy you are and how popular you are, because you can't come to Monaco.
You saw through my ruse, Mr. Tarsey. You saw through my ruse.
I fell right into your trap. And I have to say that waving a piece of A4 does work so well on an audio podcast, doesn't it?
Well.
Yeah, you can't always win those. That was a bit like, Jim, like those cop shows you see on television where they throw the stinger across the road, and and that the bad guys drive over the stinger, that you let Paul go down the road with that thing of "I'm so busy," and that was the stinger, and we really can't go into 2026 without taking a look back at the year just gone. Jim, let's just take the thought about a couple of interviews that you did for the show in 2025. We all did a lot of great interviews and met some fabulous people. Some for the first time, some they were old friends. But which were the couple of interviews that really stuck in your mind?
Actually, normally this kind of thing is, oh gosh, and you think about it. This one was a piece of cake for me when we had our early discussions about what we were going to talk about, because there were two interviews that stand out, and I will stand by them as my two favorite all year long. One happened very early in the season, and that was our interview with Ray Evernham about his book. Oh, yeah. And that book was a very, very honest portrayal of his life, and a chronicle that is probably as honest a biography as you're going to see. He talked about the good, the bad, and the ugly, and was just right up front about it all. And then the second one was also very easy. They say you should never meet your heroes. Well, I met my hero a long time ago in 1981, and then it was really, really fun to interview him again this year, and that's Pete Lyons on the book, the award-winning book that he put out, Travels on Racer Road. And Pete he's a great storyteller, and he has so many great stories. It was wind him up and let him go. And it was
the perfect interviewee, isn't it?
Yeah, and it was fun to reminisce with him, and we haven't spoken much in the last 10, 15 years, but he was the writer on the first show that I ever worked on in California, and that's when I got to meet him. And of course, he was already famous for his Formula One coverage and everything else like that. So I got to meet my hero, and he lived up to everything. And then his book is just, I've been pouring through it over the holidays again, is just an absolutely fantastic tome. I've really been enjoying it.
And it is one of those books, and I thoroughly recommend it to anybody who hasn't got it yet, because it's got something for everybody, and I think that's part of it. I mean, yes, we gentlemen of a certain age probably remember Pete from the early days of his career, but it's it's a great one, and thank you for that, because I think both of those are great. Paul, you talked to headliners, shall we call them, during the course of the year. Are they your two on the list?
I think for me, yes, the gentlemen I got to interview at the Festival of Speed were right up there. It was partly because, of course, I had so little warning that I was actually going to do them. I think I interviewed, if I remember, Mario Andretti on a Thursday, and was only told on a Tuesday that I would be interviewing. In fact, the email said, I think I've told the story before, the email just said Andretti, and I just emailed back, Mario? Sort of in surprise. And yes, it was. So yeah, it was fantastic, to be quite honest, and it was nice to do it in front of an appreciative audience who got who they were, if that makes sense. And there is only one Mario Andretti, and in fact, you talk about people who've brought their kids up right. We were late with Mario, and part of it's just moving through the crowds and everything. And we had a young lad there who had a pair of race boots that he wanted Mario to autograph. And he must have been in place a good 90 minutes before we finally started, because we went in, I think, about 45 minutes late. And right at the end, and I wrapped it up and everything, because someone in the background was giving me that wrap-up symbol that people do with their hands. But I thought, while I've got the microphone, I have still got control of this audience. So I said on microphone, Mr. Andretti, do you mind? This lad's been here 90 minutes. Could you sign it? And he didn't go, no problem at all. He was over there, chatted, I love it when those people in that position, and we meet one of them, they meet thousands of us. but they make the effort, and he made the effort, and he made that lad's day. And I thought, yeah, what an absolute gent. And then I rounded it off, I think, on the Sunday with Nigel Mansell, and yeah, Nigel was on form. He was on form. I was just setting him up, and you sort of, in a way, when you've got a big audience, you know the stories he wants to tell. And he was having fun because I'd say something, he'd go, "Oh no, don't remind me of that," and then launch off into his story and everything. And I had worked with him before many years ago, and that was a bit of an icebreaker sort of thing. But he was on fine form, I thought.
One thing about Mario that I have really found interesting and enjoy is the fact that he has thoroughly embraced the role of racing ambassador. A lot of these guys retire, and sure, Nigel is up for a good interview and that sort of stuff, especially if the interviewer knows their stuff, which Paul obviously does, and can ask cogent and intelligent questions. But Mario is not only up for a good interview, he still drives the Honda ride-along IndyCar. He does all of these things that not only keep him involved, but promote the sport, and very interesting, keep him relevant.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure does his psyche a lot of good. And he has really, like many who, whether you are a Mario fan or not, there's no way that you can look at Mario Andretti of 2025 and not love the guy. I mean, he's just absolutely everything you would want in an ambassador for the sport of racing.
Paul, you were saying about Mario signing that pair of race boots for the young lad in your audience, and when you were saying that, something crossed my mind, which was when I was that young lad in an audience, or more likely walking across a paddock or whatever, at the age of anything. I went to my first motor race at the age of 6, and haven't stopped yet. But when you walked across the paddock and you go, "Oh, there's Roy Salvadori," or "Oh, there's Sterling Moss," or whomever, and you went up with your autograph book, and who remembers autograph books? And you got with your autograph book and say, "Excuse me, Mr. Salvadori, could you sign my book, please?" They would do it. They would hand it back to you, and they would say, "Thank you."
Yes.
Never happens now. You see drivers, and I don't blame the drivers at all. It's just the way of the world that they will go along a fence and they'll sign 50 autographs on various pieces of clothing, from hats and shirts to a pair of knickers. But it's whatever
you
it might be.
You beat me to it.
I'll come back to that.
And Jim's still got them, yeah.
But it's it's one of those kind of things where the old world courtesies. Sterling would say thank you.
Yeah. These guys don't even look up now.
No.
And part of that, and again, that's not a criticism. Part of that is because there's so much stuff being shoved at them that in these lines, that if they look up, they're liable to get something in the eye by accident.
And having done a little
self-preservation in a lot of cases.
Having done a little PR at that level many years ago now, though, you can't stop. If you stop, you'll never start your driver walking to where he's got to go again, because you've suddenly got people in front of you and you can't move. So you have to keep on the move, and it's the PR. I've done driver PR at a variety of levels, and it's a strange one. You spend your whole time trying to get interest in everything on your driver, get him in the paper, etc. And then there's a tipping point where you're actually almost trying to do the opposite, and you're trying to keep people away from him enough so that he can actually go and do the job in the car. And you pick and choose, and there's some tipping point when you go from trying to attract attention to having to control the attention he's getting.
If you'll bear with me, there's a Shaggy Jim TV story.
They're the best ones.
Covering a NASCAR race for ESPN, and I was the producer, pit producer actually for this one. Neil Goldberg was the producer, and we wanted Benny Parsons to go out and do his stand-up out on the racetrack for the beginning of the race. And we're in the production meeting, and Benny kind of rolls his eyes, and I'm like, Benny, what's the matter? And he goes, I thought you'd love the idea. He says, the idea is great. He says, but man, if we're going to do this, you got to be the bad guy. And I said, what do you mean? He said, if we get out there and I start signing autographs, I can't stop. So when it comes time to go, you got to be the bad guy. You gotta make it clear that, oh, this isn't Benny, it's me. I said, oh, dude, I got no problem with that. so yeah, and so because he was of that mentality, it's about the fans, and if I start, I gotta go until everybody is satisfied, because I'm not going to disappoint anybody, because invariably the guy that gets disappointed is not the guy who's trying to sell something on eBay. It's the 8-year-old. Because he's getting pushed out of the way by the older people, which that really sticks in my craw. But that's a whole different conversation.
But it was always said that Sterling Moss never refused an autograph.
I can believe that.
And somebody told me very recently during this last year that Sterling actually had that walking through the crowd autograph, which was different from his check signature, if you like, because what he had was, if he was walking through the crowd, he would sign his autograph as Stig Moss, STIG, because you can do, if you think about it, you can sign STIG a darn sight faster than you can STIRLING.
Good point, yeah.
So if you've got an autograph that was taken at a point where he was walking through the crowds, which is where I think most of mine were, it will say Stig Moss, not Sterling Moss, which is, I think, great. In terms of interviews for me, one of the great ones for me this year was Derek Warwick. We've done several over the course of the last couple of years, but I spoke to Derek about his Le Mans experiences, and
that was great.
He was it's as you say, it's one of those easy ones, because you kind of just flick the switch. But I think the great thing about Derek is he tells it like it is. He's not settling old scores. If something was wrong or bad, then it was wrong or bad. If he liked somebody, he liked them. He's got nothing to prove. He's been there, done that, and he's done it all. And talking about, he said his first appearance at Le Mans was in the 1982 in the Kramer Porsche 936, which they converted into a Group C car. And he was very honest and said it was horribly dangerous. And that kind of thing, is refreshing, and he comes out very well in that. He's very honest. He is still involved very much in motorsport as a FIA steward at Grand Prix. Sadly, he's not allowed to talk about that to the public and to the press. So there's going to be a time when he's free of that constraint, and I'm really looking forward to that chat.
Did he sign an NDA?
No, it's part of the rules of being the
steward.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, you can't, as a steward and a committee member, you can't do that. But yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I want to book that well in advance. My other interview, I think, is one which perhaps far lower profile, dare I say it, and that was Kenny McLean. Kenny, Jim, you know Kenny as well as I do, and Kenny is the curator of the Jim Clark Museum up in Duns in Scotland, and that he came to this, and by this I mean motorsport generally, not as a motorsport fan. He isn't a motorsport fan. He's a curator, but because he's curating a motorsport museum, he's gone into it like you wouldn't believe, and that he's got so much, and that Jim, you and I were were lucky enough to be invited by our friend Peter McNaughton to dinner where Kenny was the guest speaker. There was only 12 of us around the table, and it was just brilliant. He just talked and talked and talked about Jim Clark, and
brought a trophy.
Yeah, brought the Lady Wigram Trophy from 1965, which...
How's that for it?
Well, yeah, because I can remember getting my monthly copy of Motorsport magazine in 1965 and reading about Jim Clark winning that trophy. And there it is, sitting as the table decoration for our dinner. And it was just so good.
Were you allowed to drink champagne from it?
I didn't think of
we
that.
didn't think of that.
No.
He probably would have let us.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes, he would.
a moment that's passed.
The other thing, I think, which...
We drank champagne from my cup.
The other thing with that is that, Jim, you and I were interviewing Kenny for the show, which went out a couple of months ago. But some of our party went off to the churchyard where Jim is buried, and that they were there paying their respects at the graveside. And a lady who lives in a bungalow next to the churchyard came out with her photograph album. A lady in her 80s, and she said, and I went to school with Jim and his brother, and here we are, and this is us doing this, and this is us doing that, and it's obviously her life, she sits there and waits for somebody to arrive, and then goes out and talks to them. But I think it's great that Jim's memory is still held in such high esteem.
It's little things like that suddenly make him a real person, isn't it? As opposed to the pictures, the books. Suddenly you meet someone who knew him in his scenario, and suddenly he becomes this real person to you.
Yeah, and I don't want to go down the road of nostalgia isn't what it used to be, because I think that's just one of those...
Don't do that, we'll be out of business.
But I think one of the things is that you see modern Formula One drivers are doing their press thing, and there's somebody standing next to them with a handheld recorder so that they know exactly what he said to the press, all those kind of things. Again, I don't blame anybody. It's just where we are. It's the world we live in. But it's interesting that back in those days people would do that, and people like Graham Hill were horrendously inappropriate in all sorts of ways. And nonetheless, and there is a video of Mike Hawthorne after he'd won the World Championship, and in '58, and he was presented by somebody, or I can't remember who, with a cocktail cabinet. Now, just get that. We presented him with a cocktail cabinet. And his acceptance speech, he says, "I do hope you'll all come down to Farnham and help me empty this." and you think, you can't really see Carlos Sainz Jr. saying that, or whoever.
Everybody thinks... Daniel Ricciardo drinking out of his shoe was outlandish. Well, these guys are like amateurs.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
And what are you going to do for your main trick?
Stop in the pits for champagne and cucumber sandwiches, man.
Oh, that's Rob Walker.
Exactly.
That was Rob Walker.
Yeah. Change your suit mid-race because it's getting dark.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah. Never wear tweed after dark.
You're listening to the Historic Racing News Podcast.
2025, Jim, was an interesting year for the world of auctions. The middle to lower end of the market continues to face quite a few headwinds one way and another, particularly for road-going cars. However, we continue to see some of the more modern cars holding their own, and even hot hatches, believe it or not, are beginning to perform very strongly. But the very top end seems to be incredibly robust. You've had a look, Jim, at some of the results for the last quarter of last year, and what's the market like?
Well, I've not only looked at the last quarter, I've kind of summed up some things for the entire year, and some of there's a real disconnect between what is happening. It's almost like in America, the economy versus the stock market. The stock market is very robust, and there are many people that feel that the economy is not. No matter where you fall on that line, it doesn't matter. This is the same thing. The middle of the market seems to be struggling, but overall, the market blew the doors off of 2024. And it's interesting, pardon me, it's interesting that only two so far of the auction houses have put out their official numbers for 2025. Normally that happens, Broad Arrow is always the first, and they were again this year. And in all total sales, Broad Arrow topped $654 million. Now, when I say all sales, that's not just auctions, but that's private sales as well. RM Sotheby's announced their totals, but they were a little cagey and cheeky about it because they've said it's 1 billion plus. Now, they haven't told us how many more than 1 billion it is, but it is, and that is their greatest year ever. All told, we're at 3, and this is unofficial. This is me scouring the websites and results and that sort of stuff. All told, unofficially, we're at $3.120 billion in sales, both auction and private. Probably we're closer to 3.5 billion when you put in any of the private sales from Gooding and Bonhams and people like that. It's interesting that 2025 started with a huge race car auction with the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Museum divesting itself of many of its non-Indianapolis-based cars. And the year rounded out with another race car auction, which was Renault basically doing the same thing from its factory museum. And Art Curiel took care of that auction, and it was quite interesting because they sold 4 Formula One cars. They sold one of the Le Mans winning cars, and it's, they really did. They closed very strong, and the total race car sales for the year, again, these are unofficial numbers, of course, but the total race car sales that I've been able to add up were almost $321 million.
Yeah.
And that's just huge. And there were a lot of Formula One cars that went this year. There were big sales. The fourth quarter was pretty strong because you have the Sotheby's Abu Dhabi auction, for instance, 84 million in total revenue, but almost 20 million of that was race cars. So everything closed very strong. Sotheby's Munich in the fourth quarter had 18 million in race car sales. So it was a really, really good year for race cars, driven primarily, of course, by the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Museum, which the total for that was over $100 million. The biggest seller, of course, was the $53 million Mercedes Grand Prix car. And then, of course, the 65 Le Mans winner that sold in Paris for about $34 million. So all in all, it was a great year. If you look at the mid-level auctions, in America, probably, of course, Mecum and Barrett-Jackson, they're the big headline grabbers. But in America, there are a couple other smaller auction houses that they're out there grinding. They're doing pretty well. $60 million this year for GAA, which is a South Carolina-based auction house. And they are, most of what America knows about auctions they're seeing on TV, from the Mecum auctions and the Barrett-Jackson auctions. Barrett-Jackson was the first one to put car auctions on television, and everybody was like, why are you doing that? That's like watching poker. Well, Everybody loves to watch poker, seems to be, and everybody loves to watch these auctions. So, they did that. Iconic in the UK, on the other hand, 37,890,000, and we'll be seeing our friends from Iconic at Race Retro coming up next month, and it's going to be interesting to talk to them, because I think when we talk to the folks at Iconic, we get a much more reasonable and considered line on where the overall market is, because this is, these are the as they would say, these are the very large-breasted, flashy blondes that are demanding the big money from RM and places like that. What are the what are the waitresses bringing?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and it's interesting you say about Iconic, because they've got some great stuff. John Mayhead from Haggerty has done some great research on what's happened this year on the UK market, or UK and Europe. Interestingly, he's saying that the market generally has hit British sports cars and sports saloon cars very hard. And the worst one by far is Jaguar. That Jaguar have seen a 21% drop in value over the 12 months, which is not great news for me with two of them in the shed. But
I was wondering if we were going to go there.
You were too much of a gentleman to mention it.
You don't want to rub it in, do you?
But interestingly,
what is that down to? Is that down to aging of the clientele, or what is it?
I think, and this is not what John has said, but I think Jaguar as a prestige brand is a brand of the 50s and 60s.
Good point.
That it's D-types, it's C-types, it's some of those, obviously the E-type, all of those cars. So yes, I mean, that their halo cars probably are really not in the bailiwick anymore of people who want to buy it, and that it's interesting with that. I did a bit of research on stuff that's happened outside the US. Abu Dhabi was an interesting one.
Yeah.
That Abu Dhabi sold a road-going McLaren F1 for £19.4 million.
Yeah, unbelievable.
Gulp. And I think the other one,
and that's the one they brought down on a crane. It was.
Oh, really?
As you would expect from Abu Dhabi, it was brought down into the auction from on high.
Was it?
Oh,
yes. This was the most anybody paid for a Gordon Murray car.
A gift from above.
And actually, that you bring that up, Paul. That is the one area. We kind of focus on the race cars here, but being historic racing news, but the supercar market is just insane, and that speaks to exactly what you're talking about.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Also that you say about the Gordon Murray car, that the Gordon Murray S1LM, which to the uninitiated people like me looks incredibly like a McLaren F1, but of course it isn't. In the same way as the Ineos Grenadier looks incredibly like an old Land Rover. That I know it isn't, and that let me make that perfectly clear. But the unique Gordon Murray S1LM sold, and that sold for £15.7 million, which is the highest price ever paid commercially for a brand new car. It had never been run.
Yeah,
£15.7 million. I think the strangest of anything that we've seen this year in auctions is the McLaren MCL 40, Aha, I hear you say. But didn't the MCL 39 win the World Championship this year? Yes, it did. The MCL 40 is next year's Formula One car.
Yeah.
And they have created this idea, this concept, that if you have got a bundle of cash, you can go to McLaren, you can hand over your cash. They will give you, for a year, an MCL 39, just like Lando Norris won the championship in, display car, which you can show around to your friends and hang on your dining room wall. And at the beginning of 2027, you will have delivered your MCL 40 complete, engine, gearbox, ready to run, and that you will then have that and you can do with it very much what you will. I was surprised that has actually sold for £8.6 million, which doesn't strike me as a huge amount of money in that environment.
Not really.
I think if you could sneak into the McLaren headquarters and you could work your way into that back room, you'll find Zach in there with the money printing machine.
Yeah.
That's it.
Clever man.
Getting the money in before you need to spend it. That's the trick, isn't it?
Yes. I mean, and I suppose there are two people who have bought those Ferraris, and assuming they've sold all 9 or 10, but there are two people who have bought Le Mans winners.
Right.
So perhaps they've spent 2 or 3 million on any old Ferrari 499, but actually, when it comes down to it, they've got a Le Mans winner, which is worth a lot of money. So we'll have a look, and we'll keep you involved on that, because I think some of these things are fantastic when we look at it. I mean, talking about iconic, which you were, Jim. It's interesting to see that amongst the things that they are selling at Race Retro, there are a couple of FIA Appendix K prepared MGBs, and I know, Paul, that this is something which you've been involved with peripherally from the commentary box with this new initiative for the Generations Cup.
No. I can't claim to have commentated on that one. That's a little trick that MRL have pulled. They actually ran a race towards the end of last year at Silverstone for this Generations Cup. Well, it's one of those things that is a really obvious idea once someone else has had it. If you know what I mean, you know. It's like, oh, really? Why has no one else done that? And basically, the rules were you just had to have 2 generations of the same family sharing the car. And they had a 1-hour race, and it was all for MGBs. And it was a cracking race by all sorts. I really wish I'd actually been there to see it. It was actually won by father and son duo Rick and Joe Wilmot, 2 very, very quick historic racers, with ex-BTCC star Patrick Watts and his daughter Amy, who races Caymans, if I remember correctly, in the Sprint Cup, coming second. And and there was a big old field, to be quite honest. Even featured Richard Hammond and his daughter Izzy sharing a car, so that's probably cropped up online somewhere. But yeah, just what a cracking idea to get also as a way, maybe, if you're trying to bring the younger generation into racing, come and race with Dad. Who's going to turn that one down? So it's a cracking idea, and they're building on that, and there's actually going to be 4 races that they're going to have across 2026. One at the Donington Historic Festival, a race at Brands Hatch in June, Castle Combe Autumn Classic, and then again at Silverstone right at the end of the year. And as I said, yeah, what a cracking idea from MRL.
It is. In fact, they're all MGBs.
Yeah, everyone's in a 1800cc MGB, so identical cars, essentially the pre-66 cars to the FIA K. I don't know if you actually need the K appendix or not, but you know, as long as the car is to that spec, I suspect is going to get you in there. So everyone's on a pretty much even ground, and yeah, off you go and you race with your dad or your granddad or whoever.
They're talking about selling those cars at Race Retro. For something that the 2 cars have slightly different price tags. One's 32 to 38,000 pounds. One is 38 to 44,000 pounds. So,
who drove the second one?
Yeah, nobody. No,
oh, okay.
They don't have.
I thought it was a provenance thing.
No, it wasn't. The original one has probably more race history than the second one, but in race car terms, that's not a lot of money.
It's not a lot of money for a car that you can race year in, year out.
Yeah.
Because it's not like suddenly next year you're going to need the next year's car, because it's a 1966 spec MGB. So you can race it in a huge amount of places year in, year out. So, yeah, a fantastic buy if you are thinking of going down that road.
And some of the other stuff that Iconic are selling, there's a super production. That's all one word, by the way, because it's French. Super production. Circuit race car, Renault 5 Turbo. So that's the one with the engine in the back.
Oh, the Turbo 2. Yes.
Yeah.
Which
the flying shoebox.
It was built and created by the factory, and it's the championship-winning car driven by Eric Coma in 1987. And that's you're now moving further up the scale at £200,000 estimate, and there's another Renault 5, which is a maxi turbo, which was the only maxi turbo Renault 5 in captivity that was not run by the factory, run by John Price in the UK, and that's a 1984 car. And they're looking to sell that as a rally car for around 175 to 200,000 pounds. So, it's those are big ticket items at Race Retro, but it's well worth doing. I mean, some of the other stuff that will be there and we'll be looking forward to seeing. There's a 72 Mexico Ford Escort Mexico rally car for sale. It was latterly built. It was built in 2000, but that's going to be for sale, estimated at 20 to 25,000.
They've got a Lancia Delta Group A car, don't they?
Yeah.
Also, if memory serves me right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
And then they've also got an Elva Mark IV, which is one of the old front-engined late 1950s cars. So the small engined classic British sports car from the time. It's got FIA, historical technical passport. It's got all the things that you could wish, and with an estimate of 50 to 60,000 pounds, that looks like a good buy, based on exactly what you just said, Paul, which is that you're going to be able to race that for as long as you want to. Yeah,
and wherever you want to be quite honest. Anywhere across Europe, there's ample series would happily take you in.
And I think the other thing is that is Goodwood Revival eligible. And I stress the term eligible because, as we all know, you don't enter the Goodwood Revival, you are invited to the Goodwood Revival, and so therefore it happens all the time. And interestingly, when we were covering the revival last year, Paul, talking to a number of people who were quite surprised to get invitations or didn't get invitations, and people who I expected to get invitations who hadn't been, that the races are quite managed, I think is the best way of putting it.
It is, yes. Yeah, it's interesting, as you say, that almost everywhere else, entry's open and it's who gets in first. But as you say, you're waiting for it to work the other way round there, aren't you, really?
Yeah, and that's fine. But I think they will say, this is going to be a Ford Galaxy year for the St Mary's Trophy, or this is going to be a Jaguar year for the St Mary's Trophy, or whatever, and they will create a field accordingly, and it works. That you don't get runaway victories from all sorts of people. I mean, personally, and I've said this on here before, personally I would like not to see the the big V8s in the St Mary's Trophy. I think it should be Lotus Cortinas and Mark II Jaguars, but then again, I'm an old fogey. So, that's just the way it is.
And then Romain Dumas would not be able to push people off into the weeds.
Ooh.
And you can hear my interview with Romain Dumas on the October edition.
I have to say, Paul, I can't remember if I've said this before on the pod, but I was just leaving with a guided tour as you were starting your Romain Dumas interview, and he started talking about Battenberg. And I was like, why is he talking about Battenberg? And would you like to reveal what he was actually talking about in his heavy?
No, you've started this.
It was the Ford. It was the Ford Battlebird, wasn't it? That modified Ford that was actually racing. I said, why is he talking about cake? Why is he talking about cake? It's a Ford Battlebird.
Well, it's his French accent.
Yeah. Yes, because it is actually a Thunderbird that was heavily converted for racing and became known as the Battlebird. But it's that dreadful moment. We've all done it. I know we've all done it, where you start a conversation and you think, where on earth is this going?
And why is it going there?
Yeah. That one occasion when an interview actually did turn out to be a piece of cake.
Yeah.
Oh, it was better than that.
No, it wasn't.
Oh, okay.
No. Sorry. Believe me, it wasn't.
You're listening to the Historic Racing News Podcast.
Paul, you've been doing a bit of research ready for our program.
I know that will surprise you, dear listener, that Paul has been doing research.
Yeah.
I don't need
That's
to come.
a compliment.
Okay, I'll take it as a compliment. I'll take it.
Yeah,
But basically, we go to these meetings across the year, and I was thinking, so what anniversaries have we got coming up across 2026? So I had a look for a few. We've got a couple. I'm going to start off with a couple of 100th anniversaries, and it's actually technically, and they are going to be celebrating this, the 100th anniversary of Brands Hatch. Now, back in 1926, it was used as a competitive venue, but primarily actually for cross-country running and cycling. It was a little while before engines got involved, and then we had grass track motorcycles and everything. And fundamentally, it was a former mushroom field. I'm really going to get that into my commentary this year at some point while I'm at Brands Hatch, because I'm a fun guy. And
oh no!
Look, I had the Christmas crackers. I've got them lined up here. I could do the bad jokes for the next half hour if need be. But yeah, it is, and now actually Brands Hatch are going to be marking their century of power, as they're calling it, with a full year of commemorative activities and lots of special demonstrations, displays, guest appearances. And they're not really doing any one big event. This is going to be spread across their major events across the year. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what that's going to be, because I think I should be in the commentary box for at least one of them, if not more. And it's going to be interesting because there is quite a history at Brands Hatch. Yes, it was used up in the war, and then when everything restarted in the late 40s. It was only a year or so before, in 1950, that tarmac went round, and we had that first version of a track circuit round there, which they went in the other direction.
Brands Hatch is, without a doubt, should be on every race fan's bucket list. Without a doubt.
Without blowing smoke, Jim, I would say it is probably the closest we have in this side of the Atlantic to an American racetrack.
Yes. Good point. Yeah.
The undulations,
yes.
That it's not very wide, all those things. It's really quite like an American road circuit. I mean, you would know that better than I, but
unspoiled by the FIA.
Yeah.
Very much so. And you talk about being on every race fan's bucket list. I would think Paddock Hill Bend should be on every driver's bucket list, because I think that is one of the world's classic corners. And I'm a great fan of any circuit that's got elevation changes in it. And I'm very, very fortunate in that most of the time I'm watching cars go through Paddock Hill Bend from the commentary box at Brands Hatch, which is unique. And I fully appreciate how lucky I am to be stood up there. But that first lap or so of the cars streaming through there, any race you want to name, it's always a real moment. Is everyone going to get through there? It is just still these days such a challenge, that corner.
Yep, you're absolutely right, and I'm looking forward to that. And we will be doing a Brands Hatch special during the course of the year, So keep an ear and an eye out for that. What else is on your list?
Yeah, if we're talking 100th anniversaries, well, the first ever British Grand Prix was at Brooklands on the 8th of August in 1926 as part of a European series of races across that time. And it was 110 laps of the... it wasn't quite the full oval. If you can picture Brooklands, I was going to say it's kidney shaped, but it's a bit like a butternut squash. Shall we call it that way for our more modern listeners who are into their diet or whatever? And you cut off the sort of top right corner with the finishing straight, which is what they used in that thing in that era. And we go back, and we often go back and we romanticise these fantastic races from back those days. But there were a whole 13 entries for this race, including 2 of them were actually from Malcolm Campbell, because he couldn't decide which car to race, so he actually entered his Bugatti and his Talbot. So he had 2 cars in there, and there were various people like Delage and everything who came across, and it was actually a win for the Delage with a car. And this is again how things have changed. Actually, into the 1950s, wasn't it? You could swap cars drivers into a car during a race.
Yeah.
But the Delages were all overheating, so the car was actually started by Robert Seneschal. And he apparently again, they were one of the Delages. Apparently, the exhaust was running white hot. The drivers were literally cooking themselves. And Seneschal actually handed it over to Louis Wagner, who came in and stopped several times to cool his feet down. I couldn't find any more than I've just got a picture of him jumping out the car and standing in a bucket of water, frankly, which is probably, I suspect, what actually went on. And this race was 110 laps, 426 kilometres of these cars. And again, a lot of the cars people would have just only read about. You wouldn't have seen racing or anything before. I could not, to my utter disgust in my research, find a crowd figure, because you got big numbers at Brooklands back in those days. And the great William Boddy, probably one of the great motorsport journalists of the last century, and I've got his book on Brooklands, which is one of my favourite books. He described this as one of Brooklands' great days, and it is going to be celebrated by the circuit. They are actually going to do something on the actual day on the 8th of August. So if you are free there, don't hesitate to get yourself along, because I think that is something that is well worth mentioning and well worth picking up as an anniversary. And if you want another 100th anniversary, on the 2nd of April...
Oh, yes, please.
Yes, please. You can't have too many, can you? On the 2nd of April, it's 100th anniversary of Jack Brabham's birth. And I think Jack Brabham I always think he's the overlooked triple world champion, to be quite honest. Because of, how he, this wasn't, as you mentioned earlier on, this wasn't the great publicity day. You weren't swarmed, you weren't huge. But yeah, it's actually 100th anniversary of Jack Brabham, also the 60th anniversary of his 3rd title in 1966. So if you want to do the maths, he won his 3rd title in the year he was 40. And, that was how it was in those days, to be quite honest. And, of course, that 1966 win, only time a driver ever won a world title in a car bearing his own name, because he won it in that 3-litre Brabham with the first season of the 3-litre Formula, jumping up to the big engines in 66. And he had that Repco engine, the Australian Repco engine, based on an Oldsmobile V8, I do believe, which, it wasn't the most powerful, but what it was the most reliable, and it kept him going, and he took that title. But, yeah, what a character Jack Brabham is. Say triple world champion, started off midget racing, actually started off building a midget car for his friend, and it's that classic scenario of, well, why don't you have a go? And and he actually won in his 3rd night of actually racing the car on the loose surfaces. And you suddenly, hello, I'm not bad at this, to be honest. And he came to the UK, raced for Coopers, came to the UK in 1955 racing a Cooper, and again, in one of those lovely stories, he just basically kept showing up at the factory and doing things. He was never an employee, but he would build the cars. So obviously, he knew the cars that he was racing backwards. And Cooper didn't always have the right engines, but they finally got their hands on the 2.5-litre engines that everyone was running at the time in '59. And he won, and he also took his first championship, that famous pushing the car across the line at Sebring in 1959. And Black Jack was his nickname, because he raced hard. He also apparently, because he also kept quite a low profile, isn't it? And I think, if I remember correctly, there was the Dutch Grand Prix. He was getting a bit of grief for how old he was, and he actually came onto the grid hunched over with a stick, with a fake beard on, and hobbled his way to his car to jump into it and then drive a very, very fine race. But remarkable character, Jack Brabham, and I think at some point we need to do a little bit more there.
Yeah, absolutely agree, Paul. That we do need to do that because he was a great character, and we'll celebrate his 100th anniversary.
It is, and if you think Jack Bradburn born 100, if you want to be scared by something that happened 50 years ago, because there's no way this could have been 50 years ago, 1976 Formula One World Champion James Hunt, that was 50 years ago. And yeah, we're all shaking our heads. That seems we can remember, and it's of course the famous season. It's been the famous film about it with Lauda's crash and his comeback, and of course Hunt was I think without a seat, and because Hesketh were pulling out, and got the McLaren seat pretty much at the last moment, won that title in that very, very wet Fuji. And we were talking about the drivers of the day. What a character! What a character! And I know the film sort of.
That's one way to put it.
Well, yeah. I was wondering actually in my notes. Actually, I've said it's a big character, though you wouldn't introduce him to your daughter.
Well, I actually got fairly close to that in that when James was in Formula 3. There was a Formula 3 race supporting the British Grand Prix, and I saved up my pennies and took my I was going to say my girlfriend. She wasn't my girlfriend. She was somebody who I desperately wanted to be my girlfriend, and that I thought I would try and impress her by taking her to the British Grand Prix. And we were walking through the paddock, and as we did so, she flushed a little, cheeks went a little red, and that she said, "James," and he came up.
Oh my!
Yeah, and he said, "Hello, Lynn."
And at which point you thought game over.
I did. It was all over. And I mean, having since then, this would have been 72, 3. And having since then learnt of his reputation with the women, which I'm sure was well earned, that did I ever have the slightest chance with this girl again? No, I did not. No, I did not.
Probably it was a sure thing if he hadn't been around.
Oh, but it was.
Yeah, no, she. There's levels, isn't it? Either she thought you would be a great person to go to watch a motor race with, or he'll take me and maybe I'll bump into James.
I think probably option 2 is the more likely. I mean, the only
you cynical.
And there is a pendulum.
Probably right, but still cynical.
There's a pendulum effect with this because yes, I hate him, and then he crossed the line on the last lap backwards and won the race.
Oh,
as you do.
So I mean, what is not to hate about the man?
Yeah, just retire to a safe distance at that point, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it's all those things. So yeah, that's good. But if I'm honest, and this isn't borne out by the story that I've just told at all, but I think he probably was the luckiest man since Ringo Starr as far as getting that drive with McLaren. He if Alexander Hesketh had kept going, then he would have been in a Hesketh and he might have won a couple of Grand Prix, but that was it. If Emerson Fittipaldi hadn't gone off to race for his brother, all of those things, and then if Nicky hadn't had his accident, there's no way he would have been world champion. And so yeah, I think he was incredibly lucky in 1976. But would I like to have been him? Oh yes.
That's right. So where are we?
Women love him, men want to be him.
Moving on, that was 50 years ago, James Hunt. 60 years. Let's go for a 60th anniversary. It's going to be the 60th anniversary of the Historic Sports Car Club, one of the staples of British historic motorsport. Great to have them about any one of their meetings is always good going. They're actually marking their anniversary with a special meeting at Castle Combe on August 8th and 9th, which is, of course, the venue of their first ever race they organised, which was a race for Formula Griffith. Not quite sure what that is. I will find out at some point before we mention that again. At Castle Combe on the 16th of May 1966. Stalwarts of British historic motorsport and their historic Formula Fords. What racing they provide. They are absolutely superb. I remember watching a race a few years ago of theirs at Thruxton, and it's probably in my certainly in my top 10 of races I've ever watched, to be quite honest. And as an aside, because we mentioned it earlier on, I worked out how many races I commentated on last year. 155. How's that for a season?
Whew. Yeah, that is impressive. That is very impressive.
And we mentioned it was 100 years of Brands Hatch, slightly tenuous one, but they're going for their 100 years. It's 70 years of Mallory Park, one of the smaller and I think sometimes overlooked circuits in the country, but a circuit with a great history. Again, originally a grass track. It was actually paved in 1956 at a cost of £60,000, with the little loop up to the hairpin was added a little later. Yeah, good old Mallory Park. It started off again, like everyone seems to in those days, with motorcycle meetings. But, we talk about these days about getting crowds in and everything. Their first ever, their grand opening on the May the 13th, their race meeting, 20,000 spectators turned up to Mallory Park. Any circuit would love 20,000 through the door, almost for anything, I think, these days outside of the British Grand Prix. And car racing, and again, it was actually been built by, I'm going to get this wrong, Clive Warmleton was the gentleman who actually built the estate, built the track, sold it to Grovewood Securities at the start of the 60s, who also owned Brands Hatch. And it really looked like it was actually going to be closing down in early 82. And then the competitions secretary and a gentleman called Chris Meek got themselves together and bought the circuit, and he ran the circuit for a long time. Great circuit, battled again, like a lot of British circuits, against noise restrictions over the years. What I love about them, and I will get there one day, is they hold the plum pudding meeting each Boxing Day. So on December the 26th, if you want to go racing, you've got somewhere to go racing. And just remember that in the 70s, European Formula 2 raced there. Ronnie Peterson did a 43-second lap in 1972 in a Formula 2 car. And the outright record is 38.2. Do you remember Boss Formula? It was a home for old Formula 1 cars in the late 90s and everything. And Johan Rajamaki went around in 38.2 seconds. You're going to get dizzy at that pace, aren't you?
Sounds like Lime Rock. Sounds like Lime Rock in the United States and Connecticut.
Yeah, you can just get around it quickly. And certainly those were the ones across the UK that I come up with. Jim, did you have anything from across the pond picking up as a useful anniversaries?
Well, there's three of them that come to mind off the top of my head. One is 1966 will be the 60th anniversary of Richard Petty winning his first Daytona 500. First of seven.
I was going to say it's first
Daytona
of many,
500.
yeah.
And also in 1966, of course, probably for our audience, the first Ford victory at Le Mans. This is the 60th anniversary of that. And I'm sure in June we'll be delving into that quite a bit, and all the legends of the great Ken Miles getting done poorly by the Ford executives. And also in 1966, of course, Graham Hill followed up Jim Clark as the winner of the Indianapolis 500. I believe that made him the first and only man to win Le Mans, Indy, and Monaco.
Yeah. I always remember reading at the time that there was that argument, still rages amongst some people, that it due to a timing lap scoring error, it was actually Jim Clark who won that 66 race and not Graham Hill. I think most people would accept that Graham Hill did it, but after the race there was quite a lot of discussion about it. Now we all know that the milk farmers of Indiana are sponsors of part of the celebrations, and that in those days it was expected that the winner would on the podium drink a pint of milk out of the bottle. I mean, now they pour it over.
Take a sip.
Yeah.
Take a sip.
And that evidently Jim Clark said to Graham Hill a couple of days after the race, when they were going home, that you know that they're saying that maybe there was a mistake, and Graham Hill said, as only Graham Hill could, "I won the race because I drank the bloody milk." And and you mentioned about Ronnie Peterson there as well, Paul, and just an opportunity to mention the Historic Racing News Facebook page, which is going from strength to strength. It's we have views of something like 4 million people in December of last year. 4 million views on our Facebook page, so do go and have a look. But one of the things that we did put up was a photograph of a young lady in the pits at Monaco, in a white T-shirt, and she'd been going down the pit lane at Monaco asking drivers to sign her T-shirt, and that drivers being drivers, they'd all obliged to a greater or lesser extent, but Ronnie, he was Swedish, and that he kind of took it to extremes and signed the front of the T-shirt, the upper right front of the T-shirt, and that in order to get a solid background upon which to sign,
it's not easy.
The only way that he could do that was to cup the young lady's breast and then sign properly. And we put a photograph of that up. Do have a look at it on the Historic Racing News Facebook page, because you'll be in good company, because something like 400,000 other people have seen that photograph.
Of course they have.
And I'd like to say at this point, we're actually not going to be reenacting that at Race Retro, are we?
Well, who's got the best man boobs?
Ouch.
You're listening to the Historic Racing News Podcast.
Now, in the second part of the show, we'll be looking at all sorts of stuff. We'll be talking to Paul Kenny, who is the man who is an expert on Whitney Straight, a pre-war race driver, but so much more than that.
Whitney Straight was James Hunt before James Hunt even thought about being Jim.
You are completely right there, Jim, in every sense.
He's a swordsman of the highest.
Yes.
Court.
Yes. I certainly wouldn't have introduced that young lady to Whitney Straight any more than I would. But yes, I think we'll leave it there. I think we'll move on from that, but we'll be doing that. And do have a look at Paul's master work on historicracingnews.com of the calendar for the upcoming year, because that will allow you to plan the family holiday when it's not going to clash with anything else, which might be a good idea.
That wraps up the first half of our January edition of Historic Racing News. We'll look ahead to Race Retro in February, and don't miss our chat with Paul Kenny in the second half of our show.
There are lots of ways to keep up with Historic Racing News. Our podcast comes out on the first Wednesday of every month. The show includes interviews with drivers and other personalities from years gone by, plus news of historic events like the Goodwood Revival and the Silverstone Festival. And Jim Roller keeps us up to speed on happenings stateside and looks at the activities both on and off the track in the USA.
And you can also follow us on our YouTube channel, HRN Chronicles. It's our version of a time machine. We have archive features, exclusive interviews, and behind-the-scenes stories going way back into the history of our glorious sport. Plus, we keep an eye on the latest classic and competition car auction news. It's a place where motorsports history lives.
And don't forget our amazing Facebook page. With over 1 million views a month, it is one of the leading social media channels for the historic racing fan. We feature tales from years gone by, news from around the racing world, and we also take the opportunity to flesh out the stories we cover on our podcasts with photographs and yet more background information.
If you would like to find more editions of the Historic Racing News podcast, try searching Historic Racing News wherever you get your podcasts.
The YouTube channel is simply called HRN Chronicles.
And just search Facebook for the Historic Racing News page.
You're listening to the Historic Racing News Podcast, a copyrighted presentation of historic racing news in association with White Squirrel Studios. Any rebroadcast, reproduction, or usage without the expressed written permission of Historic Racing News is strictly prohibited. Now back to the Historic Racing News Podcast and Paul Tarsey.
Kind of know a little bit about Whitney Straight. It's one of those names. I mean, it's a fabulous name anyway, but it's a great name, and we all sort of know that he was a racing driver in the 1930s. He was successful at Brooklands and latterly around Europe, but that's, I have to be honest, that's about as far as my knowledge goes. I know that his Maserati is still a regular competitor to this day. But my next guest on the show has made an in-depth study of the man who had many different facets of his career. Paul Kenny is, I have to say, you are one of the few people I know who is a chartered accountant who has a degree in archaeology, and that's got to be one of the strangest mixtures. But maybe we'll come to that a bit later.
I think I am the only man alive with an archaeology degree and a qualification in accountancy. So you're not missing out there.
Well, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Great to be on.
We think of Whitney Straight as in many ways, the archetypal Englishman, but that isn't strictly true, is it?
Quite so. He was born an American just off Madison Avenue in 1912. His mother was a Straight herself. Or I should say a Whitney herself, as in Whitney Art Gallery. She came from enormous wealth. Her father, William C. Whitney, had made a fortune out of the railroads, and he spent his first 13 or 14 years in the States. But sadly, his father survived the First World War, but died of Spanish flu immediately afterwards. He remarried an Englishman, and they all came over here, and he became he didn't become a naturalized Brit till he was 24, but you could have cut his English accent with a knife really from quite early on.
I was going to ask you that as to whether he came over as a Brit or as an American.
I think he only really bothered with becoming a naturalized Brit because after the racing years, when he got into civil aviation, it was such a pain to try and manage a fleet of aircraft as a foreign national. He kept relying on his old teammate Dick Seaman, a Brit obviously, to register his planes in Dick's name.
Right, and in many ways, Richard Seaman and him were similar kind of people, weren't they? Very, very wealthy, indulged by their parents, and that was of the day.
Yeah, I seem to specialise in writing about people who start degrees at Cambridge and don't finish them. Ray Mays, Amherst Villas, Dick Seaman, Whitney Straight, the list goes on, I think. They had very parallel lives, and I love Richard Williams' biography of Dick Seaman, and for half my book and the whole of his, they're parallel stories. And sadly, Dick didn't survive his racing years.
No, and Whitney did, but I mean, I think there's a whole other conversation to have at some time in the future about all those people whose careers were cut short by the Second World War, because there are countless people who would have made it. Sadly, Dick Seaman wouldn't have done, but there's a whole genre of people who would, and that presumably Whitney Straight was a product of the Gilded Age, wasn't he?
Very much. He Gilded Age New York through and through. A fancy townhouse in New York City, a vast country estate on Long Island, where they spent the weekends and school holidays. And yet, a man with a common tact because of his education, both sides of the Atlantic. He went to a wacky school in New York City, and his mother and stepfather founded a very, very wacky school indeed in England.
Tell us about that, Paul.
Dartington Hall. It goes back to the age of Henry II, to the reign of Henry II. But his mother and stepfather created this vision of an agricultural and educational utopia, where there would be as many teaching sessions on the estate as in the classroom. So Whitney's curriculum included managing the diesel engine that powered the Great Hall, or heated the Great Hall, maintaining the estate vehicles, and in due course, flying lessons. And days after his 17th birthday, he became the country's youngest qualified pilot.
Wow, yeah, so he was quite something. And when did the motorsport come along?
He the thing that wacky curriculum didn't allow for was Latin, and he couldn't get into Cambridge without Latin. So he left Dartington and headed to London, ostensibly to hook up with a tutor and learn some Latin. But he took with him a Brooklands Riley 9.
As you do.
And he in 1931, while not trying very hard to learn Latin, he just tried a sample of British motorsport. So he checked out the mountain circuit and the outer circuit at Brooklands. He had his first go on Selsley Walsh, and he even tried out the Thames at Southport. And that second visit to Brooklands coincided with Tim Birkin breaking the mountain circuit lap record in a 26M Maserati, lots of fishtailing and flames out the exhaust, and Whitney was transfixed. Birkin needed a more powerful car to take onto the continent the following year. Whitney's mother had a quid or two in her purse, and still a teenager, he bought Birkin's 26M Maserati, and the die was cast.
Wow. And Jim, you and I went to Brooklands last summer when you were over in the UK, and these are exactly the sort of ghosts that we talk about, aren't they?
They certainly are, Paul, and it's wonderful to hear about the drivers that, well, are now those ghosts, but made Brooklands the venerable place that it is. He also liked hill climbs, didn't he, Paul Kenny?
Very much so, very much so. And he took the mountains on the continent very seriously. So he became very associated with Shelsley, and he and Ray Mays had some great contests for several summers. But while still an undergraduate at Cambridge, he went onto the continent, and Mont Ventoux, 13 miles of very different road surfaces and corners. He went there at a time when Gracciola's record was 2 years old, and a driver as good as Philippe Toncelin told him, no way will that record be broken. And Whitney took 40 seconds off it. He'd never seen the mountain before. And I think I think he was outstanding on mountains, Selsley Walsh, and on the mountain circuit, which is a bit of a joke name at Brooklands. But he was keen to crack on. It was a very clubby atmosphere in British motorsport, and he was keen to test himself against the continent's elite on the big road circuits. So while he, for the remainder of his career, became the man to beat in Britain, he was keen to get on and start learning about his racecraft, which took a bit longer. I think those early days on motorbikes and an old Alvis on Dartington's lanes helped him, on windy hills, with no other cars around. And then the wide prairies of Brooklands, as Ray Mays called them, were easy to overtake slower cars on handicap. But he was keen to go out and test himself on the continent, and the racecraft took a little bit longer to come together.
Now, some people who might know about the BBC will know that the BBC World Service was for many, many years based in a very prestigious building in central London called Bush House, which was their headquarters and was, as I say, a very prestigious building. Prior to BBC moving in, it was the workshop and the headquarters of Whitney Straight's racing team, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. He did only have the best of everything. Mr. Bush was an American and had first looked upon that lovely building in Aldwych in London as a sort of business centre. So it was kind of natural. I'm trying to think of today's office sharing businesses.
Yeah.
It was a classic environment to move into, with its maps on the wall. He inherited some mechanics and the racing manager of Perkin, who died of septicemia not long before. And yes, they set up shop, set up the headquarters in Bush House, set up one workshop on the site at Brooklands, and set up another on the Via California in Milan, on the basis that the plan was this: he ordered 4 Maseratis. He only ever got 3 of them. These were now the 8cm models, just moving into the new formula with revised width regulations. And the plan was to race them in different parts of Britain and the continent, and indeed North Africa, throughout the season, and generate sufficient income through appearance money, prize money, sponsorship, to actually make profit. So he needed his mother's capital to set it up, but the objective genuinely was to run it at a profit.
If we look at people like Whitney Straight, if we look at Richard Seaman, if we look at Tim Birkin, would they now be viewed as being hooray Henrys rather than more than anything else? That not having to worry about money and the posh kids.
They would be, and it went into more recent times. So I'm thinking of Rabat. By a Lotus 79, that was winning last year. And a certain young man who's just become world champion had a quid or two to rely on in terms of his family support.
Yeah.
Really, he was born with a silver spoon in his mouth, Whitney, but he made best use of it. He was genuinely talented, and as I say, he was definitely the man to beat in Britain. Okay, he had very good machinery, and I suggest that even though that Maserati 8cm was no match for the Alfa, and then along mid-season came Mercedes and Auto Union, so Paul Whitney was left with the 4th best car on the grid. He made best of the machinery he had. And
you touched on the fact that he ordered 4 Maseratis and ended up with 3. Their customer service in those days was unbelievably bad, wasn't it?
What do you mean those days?
Well, you still have to have some change for a taxi when you take a Maserati out now, don't you? They were an absolute shower. And part of the problem was that Mussolini had laid down that Alfas, which were the car to have at the start of the season, couldn't be sold to non-Italians. And Maserati had no such scruples. And they got inundated with orders. So the 2 came to Brooklands pretty quickly and were given the Reed Railton treatment. The 3rd only rocked up at the beginning of the North African season because Nuvolari had broken his leg, and the Maserati destined for him, was sent down to Naples, where another of the Straight cars was heading off to North Africa. So they managed to get to 3, but the 4th car never showed up, and the 5th engine never showed up. Totally out of pocket. And for years afterwards, he was still trying to sue them, but there you go. Lessons learned.
I think you hit the nail on the head there, Jim, that some things never change. But, I mean, looking at that, and clearly he was a significant talent in a racing car. And then he got involved in the aviation business pre-war, and that very obviously and very neatly rolled into his Second World War activities. That would it be fair to say that the Second World War was the making of him?
I would certainly agree with that, but more than fair. He was, in his own words, a buccaneer. So he got into numerous business opportunities with his mother's money that went nowhere. He spent a lot of his mother's money on those Maseratis, considerable amount of money on a bunch of municipal airfields and a very handsome aircraft called the Miles Whitney Straight. But the war, even as he went into the war, he remained a buccaneer. He joined 601 Squadron, the Millionaires Mob. It was a Royal Auxiliary Air Force squadron, and well-heeled young men headed for 601. Lowell Guinness of the brewing family, Max Aitken, who became owner of the Express newspaper group, Roger Bushell, the man on whom Richard Attenborough's character was based on in The Great Escape, signed off his logbook at the end of his first month. But he was thoroughly bored. During the Phony War, that period after Poland fell, but Germany hadn't made too much further progress, he got thoroughly bored, got into trouble for taking a girlfriend up in a Blenheim to go out for the evening.
As you do.
So he went back to his contacts at the Air Ministry, which he'd formed during his civil aviation business, and said, "Give me something nasty." And they did.
Did he actually say that?
Yeah. "Give me a nasty job somewhere." Direct quote.
Is that when he went to Norway?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, okay.
So still without much happening on the continent, Norway had become a theatre of war, much to Norway's own chagrin and sadness, because Swedish iron ore was being brought down through Norway and shipped out to Germany for the war effort, and Britain wanted to cut that off. But by the time we'd got our arse in gear and started to mine some harbours, the harbours, and more to the point, the airfields, were in German hands. And Whitney became part of a small assault group trying to establish a bridgehead so that a more major assault could be made on Trondheim. And he asked for 200 labourers, he asked for heavy plant and machinery, and he asked for anti-aircraft weaponry to support him in the laying out of an aerodrome, since there were none left in Allied hands. He and a chap called Captain Bjorn who was left in charge of what was left of the Norwegian Air Force, went up in a biplane, an open cockpit biplane, in Norway in April. So that first day he had a heavy cold, surprisingly. Anyway, they found what they were looking for on a frozen lake, and they persuaded a bunch of villagers nearby to help lay out an aerodrome. And the bombing had already begun, but the local telephone exchange was still in one piece. And Whitney got a wire back to London saying we're ready, bring the planes out. And a bunch of very brave men in Gladiators who'd had no training in flying on and off aircraft carriers flew in. But, the next morning, it doesn't take much to put an airfield on a lake out of operation. The bombs started landing, the craters formed, and the whole thing was a disaster. And in microcosm, it's an example of what a complete Horlicks the Norway campaign was. He was on his way in a truck to the embarkation point for the retreat when he heard what he come to think was the inevitable. You could hear a bomb approaching. It went off next to the truck, threw him out a bit, and he was left with a big hole in his back and dreadfully perforated eardrums. So he was grounded for many months, which left him conflicted because he actually missed most of the Battle of Britain. And he was aware that his 601 colleagues were dying on a horribly regular basis while he was on the ground.
So, it was all that. He was taken prisoner, wasn't he?
Yeah, his next role, once he was back in the air, was with a fighter squadron escorting bombers trying to keep enemy shipping out of the channel. And here's his last act as a buccaneer. One day he didn't rendezvous with the bombers, and he went down the channel looking for a destroyer, as though he could do anything to affect a destroyer with the cannon on his Hurricanes. And he led the group in, and this time he'd taken the flak once too often. He was hit. He glided in over Fécamp, landed in a wheat field, and went off on the run. He had to get out of occupied France double quick, and then hopefully make his way down through Vichy, France, to the Spanish border. But after a week on the run, he was captured just inside the border, and he spent a year as a POW, and it was that changed him. For the whole duration of that year, he was the senior British officer, effectively the commanding officer over the British officers and non-commissioned people in the POW camp. And this was still only 1941 and 1942. Britain had urgent need of pilots and no need whatsoever of troops. And he sat over this cauldron whereby he was authorising and supporting pilots to escape, while proposing to troops that they sit on their hands and wait for the end of the war.
Yeah.
But it fundamentally changed him and made him a much more measured, more confident man.
And you say part of that story was some of the basis for The Great Escape.
No, I should say that one of his commanding officers at 601 Squadron in the early days.
The
was
601.
Roger
I'm sorry. Yes. Okay.
And Bushell didn't last much longer.
Right.
Than Whitney getting injured in Norway. He was got down during the defence of the troops on Dunkirk, and he began his period of captivity at that point.
There is without doubt a film of his racing exploits. There is a film of his wartime exploits.
Yeah.
And
agreed.
Having done that, and that we could sit and talk about his wartime exploits for the next couple of hours, but he then went on, and at the end of the war went into civil aviation, having been tried to persuade by Winston Churchill to become a member of Parliament. That's the measure of the man. that he then went into civil aviation in a big way.
Oh, indeed. His final job in the war was running a group, 216 transport group, who looked after transport, ferrying, the staging posts, and the crews who manned the aircraft. To begin with, over Northern Europe, but then he helped support the end of El Alamein. He supported the invasion of Sicily. He supported the rebels in the Balkans. He personally delivered a jeep to Marshal Tito. And by the end of the war, he was looking after 11,500 people under his command and 200 aircraft, and it rather fitted him for life in the airlines. He spent a year or so with BEA, and not having anything to do with short haul aircraft, but to help various European countries emerge from the war with new national airlines. So, for example, he played a founding role in the creation of Alitalia. He was the first deputy chairman of Alitalia, and he helped set up new airlines on Gibraltar and in Cyprus and Greece. And at the end of that, he moved across to BOAC, where he had the devil of a job. He effectively had three ministries to cater to. The Treasury wouldn't let him buy smart new American airliners in dollars. The Ministry of Supply held a very tight rein on what he could buy, and he had to put in his orders effectively to the Air Ministry. So he was pushed between pillar and post. He was obliged to use really poor quality, noisy, tiny airliners that were modified bombers. And it wasn't fully persuaded Westminster that a Canadian plane, the Canadair, which we rechristened the Argonaut, could be looked upon as a Commonwealth aircraft with British Rolls-Royce engines. And that's when BOAC began to turn around. Of course, he was waiting for the Comet, and briefly Britain ruled the air, and then we found out the hard way that it didn't have enough metal in the airframe. And he was waiting for the Britannia. Early on in his career with BOAC, he put in an order for, I think it was for 28 Britannias. They didn't turn up till 9 years later. So it was quite a frustrating period, but he fought tooth and nail to do the right thing by the company, even though the press hated him for he got sort of rebranded an American. Even
Funny how that works.
By the press. Sorry, Jim. Why are you banning American? But anyway, he did a darn good job, and he created an airline, a national airline that Britain could be proud of.
And well, his cousin Cornelius Vanderbilt Whitney was instrumental in Pan Am, wasn't he?
That's quite so. And there's another Whitney, Jock Whitney, was in the airline business too. Yeah, and he came over and became U.S. ambassador to the Court of St. James. So they're quite a family, you've got to say.
Yes.
We haven't mentioned his Oscar-winning sister yet. By the by.
There are so many things, and I have to say that this here book, I was absolutely struck by the detail that you've gone into, and I mean, what a fantastic story anyway. But it's a brilliant book. With all that research that you did, Paul, would you like to have met him? And would you have liked him if you did?
Ooh. His daughters are probably going to... I have utter admiration for him. Regardless of the advantages he had, he was a doer, a can-do man. I have enormous admiration for him. But if we've been contemporaries, Britain was a quite class-ridden place, but much more so than it is now. And I don't know. I mean, I tell you what, if you could read it, I think you'd like to think I'd done a decent job, and that's the most important thing. And his daughters and his son do. So I feel absolutely honoured to have found him and to have written about him.
Paul, we could go on for a very long time, and I know that for any of our listeners who are picking this up right now, if they want to hear more about Whitney Straight and the book and everything else, where better to hear the story than at Brooklands? And you're giving a talk at Brooklands on the 19th of Feb, I understand.
That's right. That's right. It's the birthplace of British motorsport and aviation. Why not talk about the ultimate wings and wheels men there? Thank you. Yes, Brooklands on the 19th of Feb.
And the book itself is available from the History Press, thehistorypress.co.uk, and is a very reasonable £25, which I think is
far too reasonable.
Yeah,
cheap at twice the price.
Would have been. It would have been.
But no, it's a great book, and I'm very grateful to you for coming on and talking about it, and I hope that we can catch up again very soon.
I hope so. I'll see you up at Race Retro, I hope. And I want to thank you both for inviting me on. I've really enjoyed it.
You're listening to the Historic Racing News Podcast.
Well, chaps, Race Retro will be upon us before we know it. In case people haven't heard about it or haven't got their tickets, they're available from raceretro.com, and the event takes place from the 20th to 22nd of Feb at Stoneleigh near Coventry, right in the middle of England. Now, I'd like to think that everybody would be turning up at Race Retro to see Jim and Paul, and me.
And you.
Yeah, me. On the live stage, we will be there on each of the 3 days. Not for all of the 3 days, I hasten to add, but we'll be doing some bit. We're going to be doing the Corridors of Power game again. And for anybody who hasn't heard about Corridors of Power, we do it from time to time on this show. And we will think of something ridiculous and ask a small panel of people to come up with their interpretation. I can tell you that one of the ones that we will have in Race Retro will be the most outlandish sponsors. So we'll be looking at that, and that's going to be good, Jim, isn't it?
One way to sum up Corridors of Power: think of something outlandish, and then a bunch of guys argue about it.
Yeah, that's it.
Good natured.
Yeah.
Lots of banter, lots of fun, but just think up something crazy and then argue about it.
And Jim, you and Paul will be on the panel, and we'll have a different guest each day as well.
You're going down, Jurd. You're going down. Trash talk starts early.
If you've come all that way, it'll be just cruel to beat you, Jim. So I'll just roll over.
Don't do that.
Because I ain't rubbing your belly.
No.
There will be opportunities for some audience participation as well. So do come along and see us for that. And on our next show at the beginning of Feb, we will fill you in on all the times and guests and everything else. But we'd like to do that. But it's an interesting one at Race Retro, because Stoneleigh Exhibition Centre was originally built for the National Agricultural Show, huge site, and the National Agricultural Show was the big event for the farming community. The show went on for quite a long time, and people would go up there, meet everybody and everything. And over the years, the actual venue got various different buildings built on it. So now, if you're a farmer, you want to be able to talk to somebody about tractors, but you also want to be able to talk to your bank, and you want to talk to other people. And all of those people, tractor manufacturers, banks, everybody's built their own pavilions. They're all different, around the arena where people would parade their cattle and everything else. Now, the National Agricultural Show, for reasons that I don't know and I wouldn't go into here anyway, faltered and eventually died. But the venue continues. So there is a lot of outside ground, particularly that big parade ring and the access roads around it. And they turned that into a rally stage. and that I know this will be absolute joy to you, Jim, because you're the rally man of the three of us. And what are you looking forward to seeing there?
Well, I'm looking forward to see Paul Jurd paraded around like a.
This is turning into a grudge match already, isn't it?
Very much looking forward to seeing some of the Group B cars that are going to be there this year. That is the era from which I sprang. Very, very fortunate in my life to have a varied time both in television and radio and other things. And one of the things that I was able to do because of television in 1982 was I was trained to be a co-driver by John Woodner's co-driver Ginny Reese, who gave up her seat in a what was then a Datsun, now a Nissan 510, and John Woodner was the driver, and we competed and finished third in the SCCA Pro Rally at Susquehanna Trail behind Rod Millen and John Buffum. Buffum in a Quattro and Millen in a Mazda RX-7. So I got to compete against the Quattros. I stuck with I fell in love with the rallying and stuck with it, and eventually worked a bit with BF Goodrich Tires, who were the sponsor of the American Rally Series. And they had a media card from my doing the thing with Ginny Reese. They came up with the idea to do a media car, and because I'd already done it, I co-drove for various other members of the media, and also if they didn't feel comfortable driving, I drove and they co-drove. So that's how my rally career was born. I had a couple podium finishes as a co-driver. Like I say, one with Woodner, one with John Buffum's regular co-driver, who later we finished third in the Snowdrift Rally because John would occasionally let his co-driver go ahead and drive. But so rallying has always been near and dear to my heart, and Group B rallying for most of us who are big rally fans are like the Can-Am cars are to sports car fans from the 70s, because the rule book was, what rule book? And it was unbelievable, and it actually got to the point where it was too dangerous. And the straw that broke the camel's back was the equivalent of rallying, probably would have been his rallying Ayrton Senna, Henri Toivonen in a Lancia, literally going off a cliff, and he and his co-driver perishing in the accident. And that really brought things had been bubbling under the surface because of crowd control issues. There were fans in Spain and Portugal who there was a thing in American Native American Indian culture back during the time when the American West was being settled. It was called Counting Crow, where a young warrior would get his chops by going up and actually touching his enemy and getting away without getting killed. And that's what the fans were doing with the rally cars, is they were trying to touch the rally cars as they came by. And if you go on YouTube and look at any of the Group B rally stuff, there is unbelievable video of the crowd parting like the Red Sea as the car comes through at well over 100 miles an hour sideways, and guys drivers started protesting because they were afraid they were going to kill somebody and it would be on their conscience. And eventually, cooler heads prevailed, and because of, like I say, the Toivonen crash was the straw that broke the camel's back, in many people's opinion, mine included, and we ended up with Group A, and that was a much more calm, safe form of rallying. But these Group B cars are, for many of us, like you say, nostalgia, and we remember them so fondly because they were beasts. And Paul, you and I at Zandvoort got to see a Lancia 037 up close, And it was basically a tube frame with an engine and some flimsy fiberglass.
Yeah.
And that was it. And these things, it started with the Audi Quattro. Then the Peugeot came online. And, of course, Lancia had the 037, and then they went to the Lancia Delta. And that thing was just, that took everything they had learned from everybody else and put it into that one car, and that thing was unbelievable. And so long story short, this is you're gonna need to towel me down and keep the elephant gun handy with the tranquilizer dart and that sort of stuff, because I might embarrass myself. You never know.
Oh, I very much doubt that. No. Perish the thought.
As if.
And God forbid they let me get behind the wheel of one of them bad boys.
You might get a ride. Who knows?
Yeah, well, I tell you, it's I after doing the stuff with Woodner and the stuff with B.F. Goodrich, I was doubly blessed because Rod Millen had developed a 4-wheel drive Mazda RX-7 all on his own, because Mazda would give him the pieces and parts but didn't want to fund it. So he funded it himself and built his own 4-wheel drive Mazda RX-7 because he knew that was the only way he could compete with John Buffum. And unfortunately, his regular co-driver, Ardale Crashauer, became ill. And because I had the B.F. Goodrich connections, I got tabbed to be his co-driver for part of the season. And it was, I'm glad I went to early testing, because it got me over the habit of watching him work, because I had things I needed to be doing. And he was so fantastic that watching him work became, that was something you had to really be careful of. But he, Ardale got healthy, and Ardale was easily half my size. And, and I will never forget the phone call from Rodney once, and I knew it was coming, because I knew Ardale was getting better, and I had always told Ardale and told Rodney that, I'm not in this for the long haul. I'm a TV guy, and I love doing it, but when he's ready, you got to put him back in. And Rodney was so cute, because he was so shy about, he's really smaller than you are. And I go, I know, you had to change the entire geometry of the car to fit my fat ass in it. So, I get it. Go get him. And so, that was a great part of my overall career, was the time I got to spend in rally cars around the United States.
Paul, what are you looking forward to?
I have to say that I've only actually ever been to Race Retro on the Friday, which is when the rally cars don't run. So I will stick my nose out at some point and actually have a look at the rally cars, because I was a great believer in actually that rallying was just a way of getting a nice car muddy. And I also had a passenger ride sitting alongside Gwyndaf Evans on one occasion. And what struck me there was just the sheer workload in the car. And we were on quite a short little stage. We did 2 little laps of a rally stage they used to have at Silverstone. It was a shakedown, I think, for, if I remember, the Network Q or whatever it was called at the time. And and I'm thinking, you've got 30-mile stages, some absolutely huge stages, and you are just so busy on this little stage. And that really took me back. So a lot of respect for those guys. But one of the things I like about Race Retro is it's a great supporter of the clubs. There seems to be an understanding going on there that how important the clubs are to this essential sport. And you've got the big players who are going to be there. Quick Classic Racing, HSCC always have a great stand and everything. But even down to the Classic Formula 3 Association and some of those little clubs, it is their chance to actually get out there and remind people that they exist. And I do love what Race Retro actually does for them, and the fact it is that place you can go and look. And of course, as we commented, I think in our last pod, it's now the big motorsport show in the UK. It's outlasted the Autosport show, which isn't happening this year. And once upon a time, that was the place you went to bump into people. And again, you go to Race Retro now for the people you're going to bump into, and it's a chance to have a chat. And quite often, you know them, and they're at race meetings, but they're not always at the same race meeting with you, or you're doing your job, they're doing their job, and it is just a chance to talk to people. And also just quite looking forward to talking to any of our pod listeners who happen to be there and want to say hello. So I think that's going to be a good thing.
Yeah.
You mentioned... Sorry, Jim, go.
I was just going to expound on the fact that it has survived because I think it is that grassroots appeal. Because it is for everyone to come, no matter what level of racing you're involved in, whether it be a fan or as a competitor, there's something there for you, whether it be parts or representatives of parts people or chassis people or whatever. There is something there for not only the active racer, but the anorak fan who's looking to be able to get up close and touch cars almost literally, whether they be on display or out on the rally stage or on the interview stage, or come and interact with us and have some fun.
And don't forget, of course, that Iconic Auctioneers will be running on Saturday. And so therefore, if you're coming any of the 3 days, go and have a look at those. There's a slight extra charge to go around the auction hall, but nonetheless well worth it. And if there's a few of you, and I'm sure us three will be part of that, it's well, what would you buy then? And
exactly, that's the game to play, isn't it? And I think we're all going to do that.
Do you think Betty will believe me if I tell her it followed me home?
You're going to have to look after it now, yeah.
I'll walk it every day.
There's always some, and of course the other side of this, and this isn't true with Iconic Auctioneers because they are very real people. But sometimes you will go to an auction and you've seen the pictures. And on the auctioneer's website and things, and when you get up close and personal, I remember looking at a Porsche 962, which will after that become unmentioned in terms of which Porsche 962, and it was a real old dog in terms of that it was some very second-hand looking bodywork and things, which I'm sure came down to patina and provenance, but I think it's always interesting to see some of these cars as well. And again, the same thing, they are club racing cars first and foremost. You're not going to see anything silly over and above that. So, yeah, please, and as Paul said, please come and say hello. We'll be wandering around, and we'll be wandering around in the uniform, and that in addition to that, come and see us on stage, and we will be back next month, beginning of February, to give you chapter and verse on exactly what will be happening at Race Retro. So that is the other one, the other important part of that. But that, gentlemen, is about it. We've run out of time again.
How does this keep happening?
But it does. That I'd like to thank everybody. I would like to thank Paul Kenny, because he came on and talked to us about Whitney Straight, who was a man who really was amazing in every sense. I mean, that if you think that the BBC World Service was based in a building called Bush House, which is a very highly prestigious building in central London. Bush House before that was Whitney Straight's workshop for his racing team. This probably won't mean much to some of our listeners overseas, but Paul, you will remember an actor called James Robertson Justice.
Oh yes,
who was he always played very pompous.
Sir Lancelot Spratt. Wasn't he? Yes, in the Doctor films. Yes, the very pompous surgeon.
Well,
Spratt, not to be confused with Pratt.
He before he ever became an actor, he was chief mechanic for Whitney Straight. Think about that. And Jim, when you get a moment, go on and just Google James Robertson Justice, and you'll see exactly how ridiculous.
I'll probably recognize the face.
You will, definitely.
Just very, very quickly, we don't do this very often, but I just wanted to say hello to one of our regular listeners, Simon Parfitt, who I know on Facebook, and I know from meeting at the circuits, and I always have a great chat with him. A great delight to bump into him, and he looks after a wonderful range of historic cars. But ended up in Papworth cardiac unit just before hospital, having thought he had a foot infection or something, and ended up being told he'd had a heart attack. So get well soon, Simon. He is back at home now. Much valued listener. Looking forward to seeing you. Thanks. I just really wanted to give that a mention.
Well, that's it for this edition of the Historic Racing News Chat Show, powered by Race Retro. I'd like to thank Paul Kenny. As we say, he told us all sorts of stuff that we didn't know already about Whitney Straight and about racing in those times. My thanks to the Gruesome Twosome, Paul Jurd, and the man who also produces the show, Jim Roller. You'll be pleased to hear that even in 2026, my name is still Paul Tarsey. And as always, if you have been, thank you very much for listening.